Thank you all for attending today. My name is Natalie Went. I'm the co-chair of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion SIG. I'd really like to thank you for joining us for this important SEFI at Work event, which is intended to facilitate further conversation about what we can do, both individually and collectively, to contribute to making the SEFI conference and SEFI as a whole more inclusive. So as we know, participating in conferences is an important part of an academic career. It provides this opportunity to network and to meet and discuss developments in our field, and also has an impact on career progression. However, multiple studies have shown that there's barriers to attendance and participation, which can exacerbate inequality and inequity. And addressing these disparities is an ethical imperative to ensure that academic knowledge production is inclusive and also represents the diverse voices within this community. So the session really is aimed to give you an opportunity to share your experiences, your ideas, and also cover some of the current practices implemented in a variety of different conferences to try and reduce barriers, which we hope will inspire actions within our own community. So in recent years, the SEFI community has grown both in size and diversity. And as co-chair of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion SIG, I'm really happy to see this intervention and initiative launched at EPFL. So I'm going to introduce and hand you over to Joelyn, who will be guiding you through the session today. Just by way of introduction, Dr. Joelyn Lima is currently a pedagogical advisor at EPFL Switzerland and a visiting scientist at the W.K. Kellogg Biological Station, Michigan State University, USA. Her background has given her a unique blend of perspectives in terms of culture, as she's lived, worked, and taught on 3 different continents, theoretical grounding, both natural sciences and education, and practice, research and education, formal and informal education, and both K-12 and university level. Her current research and teaching focuses on increasing inclusivity in higher education. So I'll hand over now.
Hi all, I'm Joelyn and thank you for joining us. We'll be together for the next hour or so. I would like you to be both cognitively and emotionally engaged in what we are doing. And so whatever you need to do for self-care, please go and do it. If you need to step away from your computer, if you need to keep your camera on or off, if you need water, food, please make sure that you're taking care of yourself so that you can be engaged here today. So having said that, well, that didn't work. There we go. So today we will be talking about increasing inclusivity at SEFI conferences, but in the light of literature and best practices from other fields. So let's dive straight in and look at what the literature says about why conferences are important. So this was a survey that was sent out to participants of the International Marine Conservation Congress, asking them about their professional gains after attending conferences. And a lot of them said that they got new ideas and learned new skills or research techniques. But almost all of them said that they made new professional contacts, which then led to new publications and new grant proposals. However, almost a third of them said that they got access to new funding because of collaborations they developed during the conferences. The data that I'm going to show you now is from a really cool quasi-experimental survey. Now, in 2012, the American Political Science Association was going to have its meeting in New Orleans on August 30th. However, because Hurricane Isaac was going to hit just at that time, 2 days before the conference was going to start, it was cancelled. So just 48 hours of notice. Basically, the program had been set, the conference papers had been submitted, everything was done. So this was a cool experiment. You had 3,000 conference papers, but no conference experience to go with it. And the members of that same community had also met at a different conference earlier that summer, which was in the Midwest. So there was a control. And so this was a really cool opportunity to see if these papers had reduced academic visibility because of the cancellation. Now, and the response, of course, was yes. So the first graph that you see in the top uses downloads as a proxy for visibility. And the experimental conference is in the gray line, control conference is the black dashes. So basically, you can see that the 2012 conference had much fewer downloads, those papers. When it comes to citations, usually the experimental conference had higher citations than the control conference. But however, for that year, that was reversed. So the citations were lower and the downloads were lower. And this effect was the starkest, or the biggest, for early career researchers. So for articles authored by academics who had lower profiles, who were not from the top institutions, or who did not have high profile publications before this. So the people who really we want conferences to benefit. So basically, attending conferences has a huge impact. It is not only fundamental in promoting scholarly discourse, networking, collaboration, and dissemination of research findings, but it has implications for career progression, research funding, and academic impact, which is really important. And these impacts are not just for the participants, but for the wider academic community as well. Because if all of us are not represented at conferences, then there are only a select voices being heard, and select research is getting a visibility and is able to provide impact. And so in order to therefore think about how we can bring this back to us, if we want to make SEFI more inclusive, perhaps we need to start figuring out who we are. And so I invite you now to go to the Miro link that Ciara is going to put in the chat right now and list all the aspects of diversity that you think are represented within the SEFI community. For example, I have given you 3 to start with, so you don't need to think of those: sex, race, and gender. In addition to that, what other aspects of diversity are represented within the SEFI community? And we will take approximately 3 minutes to do that. Brilliant. Thank you so much. As you are now writing about that, I want you to think one step further. But for this one, we are going to work in groups. We're going to go into small breakout rooms in which you're going to think of the aspects of diversity from this particular exercise that you just did, and think what are barriers that people can face based on these aspects of diversity. One, for attending SEFI conferences, so just getting there. And 2, to participate in SEFI conferences once they are there. So we will split you up into breakout rooms now, so you can have your discussions there. The breakout rooms are not recorded, so please feel free to speak your mind.
And so here for the barriers, you can add this prompt 2 as a next layer down in this mind map here, where it says prompt 2. You can, what are the barriers related to language? What are the barriers related to neurodiversity? And you can also have one barrier that links to multiple aspects of identity.
Clara, if you'd like to send us into breakout rooms now, thank you. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you all. I was able to join one of the groups, but that was a really cool conversation. And I can see that you are going beyond just the, beyond some set bounds that we've been thinking of, and thinking of identifying other potential barriers that members of our community might face. So I would like to talk to you about a few ideas that we can learn from literature. A major caveat here is that most of these studies that I'm going to present are because of inequities due to gender, and these are studies that have been done in the USA. Now, that does not mean that it's only they who have the problem, or that gender is the only issue. It's just that this is the data that was available to me. So maybe you want to generate new data, and you want to do some more studies. And so then next time I can present your stuff. All right. So This is a study that looked at the differences in costs for participants based on purchasing power parity when compared against cost for US participants, which are represented by the red line. The costs for the participants from South Africa were about 2.6 times as much, and for those from Brazil and Turkey were almost twice as much. Now, the countries which have been used in this study are upper middle income countries. So you can imagine that the situation is much worse for lower middle and lower income countries. Before I continue, Clara, is the recording on? I think so. Okay. This particular study, the Society for Freshwater Sciences compared their demographics against the demographics of the United States in general and found that marginalized groups, including disabled people, were underrepresented at their conferences. In addition to barriers people face when going to conferences, they also face barriers when they do go there. So this was another conference. This was a conference that actually had more women participating than men. But actually, for every question asked by a woman, men asked 1.8 questions more. When perceptions of conferences being sexist are explored, women generally perceive sexism in conferences more than men. And these perceptions are highest when the conference is gender imbalanced towards the men. And the women who felt the conference was sexist were then asked, what would you do in response? And most of them said, well, nothing. I will just be silent. And then they also went on to say, but I will most probably leave academia. So our conferences can contribute to academic attrition. Now, this was a study that was done at an evolution conference and showed that 14% of the participants experienced unwelcome behavior and 3% of them experienced assault or harassment. And this was most visible in members of underrepresented groups, such as undergraduates, LGBTQIA, women, and pre-tenure faculty. They went one step further and they asked the people, why do you think you were targeted? And I will now show you a heat map. I don't need you to read everything, but I just want you to absorb the overall pattern, which shows that people were targeted. They think that they were targeted mainly because of their sex, their age, or their race. And then you have intersectionality that occurs because you're not just a woman, or you're not just old, or you're not just of a race. And when you compare, say, just the experiences for females and males, females were more likely to experience unwanted behaviors because of their sex, but also because of perceived traits. They were 8 times more likely to receive unwelcome behaviors. When it comes to academic professionals, in addition to being discriminated because of their sex and age, sex and race rather, they also were on the receiving end because of their religious beliefs. Now, let's think about what are potential strategies that could mitigate some of these barriers. So we spoke about diversity at SEFI. We spoke about what are some of the barriers at SEFI. Now let's think about what can SEFI do to mitigate some of these barriers. What can we do to make the conference more inclusive? And now is a point to just explore possibilities. We can be practical later. We can think about costs and all that later. We can think about logistics later. Now, just be creative. How can we mitigate some of these barriers? So Sierra is going to put in a new link to Miro in the chat where she wants you to go now.
Same Miro, but there's going to be a third layer of bubbles now that and in this third layer of bubbles, we can actually look at adding some mitigating strategies here. These are with little blue, so the blue lines coming after. What are some of the mitigating strategies that are linked either to the specific barriers or mitigating strategies that are linked to aspects of people's identity or to or to their experience more specifically. So there's some of these that are in blue here. And
Thanks, Sierra. And so we will go into breakout rooms now for about 7 minutes. So Clara, if you can open the breakout rooms again, and you can have your discussions there. All right. So in the last part of me talking, I would like to share with you some ideas from other conferences. And as I said, I am mainly, the conferences I go to are biology based. So this will be mainly from biology conferences. So looking at what strategies they have implemented. Now, the American Society for Microbiology, in 2013, in the summer of 2013, they did a study looking at gender participation from the previous years. And then they presented all this data to the people who were planning the 2014 meeting. And they made 2 points. One is that female speakers were underrepresented, and there were too many sessions that were only male speakers. And two is that the presence of at least one female convener on the team was associated with an increase in female participation and the decrease in the likelihood of an all-male session. So the simple intervention of presenting the data from prior meetings was then associated with an increase in convener teams comprising of at least one woman and an increase in female speaker participation to 43% from about 30% average in the prior 3 years. Now, this was a dramatic increase, but that was not good enough. And so in the summer of 2024, 2014, again, they did pull the stats together. They were shared with the people planning the 2015 meeting, but they did one other thing. I'm going to show you a slide that they shared with the people organizing the meeting. I don't need you to read everything, but I want you to focus on the 2 aspects that I've highlighted in red. You've made significant progress, but you need to do better. And if you see a proposed all-male roster, please demand an explanation. It is okay to intervene. So don't rest on your laurels, do better, and demand accountability from your peers. And basically, in 2015 and since then, the conference has essentially achieved gender equality among speakers, and the percentage of all male speaker sessions was reduced tremendously, and the gender differences among conveners disappeared. So basically, even if you had all male convener teams, they were just as likely to invite female speakers as those teams that included a female convener. Now, as you have put in the Miro board, diversity has so many additional dimensions. And while we don't have data regarding all those dimensions in the effect, I'd like to tell you about a few things that are being done based on my experience attending conferences in these different societies. So for people facing economic barriers, there are scholarships provided. This is for people from lower SES countries, but also for students who don't have as much disposable income as the others or access to funding. But there's also a sliding scale for registration. Virtual conferences are given free of charge for people from lower SES countries, and that's done by Evolution. The Society of Evolution does that. If your visa is denied, your registration costs are refunded. And there is ability for peer-to-peer sponsorship. So for example, people from higher economic societies and countries can say, okay, I'm giving you this much more in addition to my registration cost. That money is to be funneled for somebody who is a student or from a lower socioeconomic community. So the peers supporting peers. People facing geographic barriers. The Evolution Society has made a law that you cannot have the conference in any place that discriminates people on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And so if any of this is in the laws of that particular country or state, the conference will not be held there. Inclusive destinations also include within the conference itself. So the conference location is chosen in such a way that, every single site is accessible for people with mobility issues. And then, of course, having hybrid conferences where part of the conference, so the Evolution conference also is hybrid. It's a mixture of hybrid and in-person. So 3 days are hybrid, and then 3 days are only in person. So at least you get to attend some of the sessions, and if not everything. For people with disabilities, free attendance for the support person. So if you have a sign language interpreter or a sighted guide, that person can come to the conference for free. You don't have to pay a registration fee. Listening systems to help you if you are hearing, if you have issues with your hearing. If you are going to other country and you need, or a different place, some of the societies offer you help in finding a suitable sign language interpreter. Ensuring that all events are mobility friendly, providing nutritional and allergy information for all the food provided during the meeting, and before the meeting, having trainings, but also resources to help people make their materials more accessible. So if you're going to publish a paper, how do you make that PDF accessible? If you are going to be sending your talk as a PDF, how do you make that more accessible? How do you make your PowerPoints more accessible? So having trainings for people before that. This is also something really cool that one community that I am part of did. So I'm an extrovert. I love going and talking to people and making new friends. But going to a new conference when you're the only person there, you don't know anyone, can be very intimidating. Everybody already has their friends, they're already talking, and these might be like really influential people in your field, and you have to go and talk to them. So that it can be really scary. So at Sabre, which is another conference that I used to go to, on the name tag, there is a colored tag added, which says new to Sabre. And basically everybody else is told that if you see somebody with this tag standing alone, you better go and talk to that person. You better make that person feel included. So nobody with that tag should be alone at any point in time. Then there are mentoring programs where the people who are coming to the conference for the first time, there is a meeting before the conference where you are given an orientation to, this is how this particular conference works. This is where you might want to go. This is what you might want to do. And you're assigned a mentor who will be with you throughout the meeting, who will walk with you throughout the meeting. The nice thing is usually we see mentees coming back as mentors the next year. And so it's really this community that develops. And of course, having specific networking opportunities. This happened. This was at Behavior 2023, which just happened this summer. For people facing discrimination, it is often difficult for them to say something, but having active trained bystanders, not just active bystanders, but giving people training to say, what do you look for? And then what do you do before that? Having explicit messaging in the materials that go out, which tell you this is unacceptable and this is what will happen to you if you do something like this, and making it easier for people to report if they have faced any sort of discrimination, really helps people feel more included. For people with children, I've been to conferences where there have been complimentary childcare, and the way they have made this is you have to give this one conference, you have to give a credit card on record. If your kid comes, you don't pay, your credit card is not charged. But if you are blocking a slot which somebody else could have used, then your credit card is charged. And then, so it's complimentary if you use it. Then there are providing nursing rooms, but also additional resources for parents, such as, just places for parents to hang out and maybe like babysit in groups. For non-native speakers, so again, this was done at Evolution. When we were signing up for registration, we were asked if we are native English speakers or fluent in English, and if we would be willing to coach somebody who is not a native speaker or not fluent in English. So basically, they asked us for an hour of our time. And on the other hand, you were asked if you are not a native speaker or not fluent, would you like some coaching in order to, bring your presentation, to polish up your presentation? And basically, we were matched with people who spoke a language in common, and that helped develop community as well. Offering live translation is something else that I've seen. But in addition, having your slides presented in multiple languages at the same time, if they're being presented in 2 different places at a conference, is also something that I have seen. Now, as I said, most of the stuff that I told you in this last bit comes from my experiences in these 4 conferences. The thing that stands out the most to me is making sure that we are transparent and that we are accountable for what is happening, that we make it a point to not bury our head in the sand and pretend that everything is okay, but look for what is not okay so that we can fix it. And that is what we would like to do at SEFI now. We would like to identify what is not okay so that we can be accountable and so that we can do something about it. And therefore, in the last 15 minutes, I would like you to help us make an evidence-driven change to make SEFI more inclusive. So for now, Ciara is going to put a link in the chat. If you have not responded to the survey yet, please do so now. You have 15 minutes now. If you have already done so, or once you finish doing that, please send that link to at least 3 of your colleagues who you think are unlikely to have responded, and ask them to respond and pass it on. The survey is for all SEFI members, not just those who attended SEFI 22 or 23, but for everybody. With this, I'm now going to stop recording. I'm going to ask Clara to stop recording so we can have conversations here, which will not be recorded. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for taking the step towards making SEFI more inclusive. We appreciate each and every one of you.